Donna Schwartz here from the Everything Saxophone Podcast. I am really happy to have Andrew Hadro here on the podcast today. So we reached out to each other, and he's got a really, really interesting album, and yes, I'm using the word album, coming out very soon. And let's just put it this way, it's reminiscent of what Sonny Rollins did many, many
Sure.
years ago. Okay, I'm talking about a bridge type of thing happening
Right.
here. And I understand the bridge because I'm originally from New York. But anyway,
Right.
we're going to get into it. Welcome, Andrew, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm definitely in New York City, as you'll hear from the honking outside. I appreciate the chance to talk to you about it and tell everybody about the album and what I do. Thanks very much.
Oh, absolutely. So your new album is called Arch Music. And the
Right.
reason why it's called Arch Music is because this album was recorded under the Cleft Ridge span in
Mhm.
Prospect Park, Brooklyn.
That's
Okay,
right.
so not the same thing that Sonny Rollins did,
No,
many, many years ago, but
sure.
I'm really curious. I'm going to start off this way, and this is a little different for me. What inspired you to create this new album called Arch Music?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and it's a complicated answer because it was a complicated time.
Ah,
So obviously, it's all COVID related. So, I'm a working musician in New York and I have lots of gigs, and generally I just play at the clubs and venues and whatever. COVID happened, there's no gigs, right? So I'm practicing at home, I'm making the most of it. I really started to practice flute for the first time in my life, did all these great things, but I missed performing, right? And playing outside of this practice space that I'm in now. I always loved reverberant spaces. Every saxophonist, every instrumentalist really loves reverberant spaces. I also really love Prospect Park. I've always lived within a mile of Prospect Park. I spend time there. I run there. It's a beautiful park. I love history. I'm really into the history of Brooklyn. And I started learning, especially during COVID, more about the history of Brooklyn and exploring it more. And, when COVID happened, we stopped going to the parts of Brooklyn that everybody else was going. So it was going more into, Prospect Park has this main drive around it that everybody goes. Very few people actually go into the inner part of the park where there's all these tunnels, there's these trails. You can go for miles on trails and not see another person, and
I
it's
didn't know that.
it's beautiful. And so I started exploring more Prospect Park and learning the history. And I found there are these tunnels that go under the roadway. And one in particular, my goal was to play in every single tunnel in Prospect Park. And I was playing through a lot of them, and I found one that really just, the acoustics were the best. There were some other tunnels. Actually, this is an insider secret. The photo from my album cover and the photos I took are actually from a different tunnel that they had just redone right before COVID, and it's beautiful, the Endale Arch. And that tunnel I played in, and it sounds good, but the one I actually recorded the album in is called the Cleft Ridge Span, and it's a little farther south in the park. It's on the east side of the park, which is not the park slope side, so it's not the as well known or maybe wealthy side of the park, and it's not lit actually at night either.
Oh,
Um, so
okay.
I would go at night. I'm a bit of a night owl, especially before I had a kid, and I would go play. The park technically closes at 1 a.m., but I would go at maybe 11 and play from like 11 to 1 every night. And I would go to that tunnel and I would play. In the dark, pretty much. I mean, there's some lights outside the tunnel so you can see. But I'm playing, obviously in the summer when it's warm enough for fall and spring. And I'm
Okay.
playing in the tunnel and just learning the acoustics of the tunnel. It's really interesting. And I talk about this a little bit in the liner notes, but so it's a tunnel, but it's outside, right? So it changes every night because you've got different humidity, air pressure, temperature, all these things. The resonant frequencies. So like you might go one night and wow, like E flat in this one range is really speaking, and it really like I get like a 7 second reverb or something. And then, a different night that doesn't reverberate at all. And you get a different set of pitches that work. And also as you walk around, it's an arch, right? So it's a tunnel with an arch. So as you walk, either closer to the wall or farther to the middle or closer to the opening, or you get different resonant frequencies and different sounds. So every time I go, I'm walking around, I'm playing towards the wall, I'm finding that night's improvisation, right? Because it's all based around the temperature, where you're standing, everything. The different instrument, I would bring a baritone saxophone, a bass clarinet, a bass saxophone, alto saxophone, whatever I had, I would bring, or whatever I decided that night, sometimes multiple things. And I would go and I would play. And I just did this as a way to like start playing outside the house. And I really got into this tunnel, and it was really meditative and really fun. And also playing solo saxophone is really hard, right? It's not only is outside hard. When you're playing outside, you don't get any feedback. There's no microphone. It's physically it's difficult,
Yeah.
but also just musically, like it's like not everybody can just talk for 30 minutes straight like I can. But it can be very difficult. When you have a reverberant space, you almost have harmony built in, right? Because you can play a note and the note reverberates and you can play on top of that note. So it's almost like you're playing with a bass player because you can honk a low, C, and then you can play over that C, and you have also every note you're playing bleeds into the next. So it's not quite harmony, but it's not quite like solo saxophone in a dry room. So I just really fell in love with doing it. I was doing it for a few years, and then I finally said, you know what? Why don't I just bring a recording device and come and start recording? So I would not even necessarily with the idea of doing an album. I would share it on my YouTube, social media. So I just started recording every night. So I would have an hour, 2 hours of recordings from every night I would go. I would go once or twice a week. And then 5 years later, I was like, I should do an album. So really the hardest and longest part of this album was going through 5 years of recordings
Oh my
and
God.
cutting out, because nothing on the album is more than a few minutes long. I really wanted just a few minute snippets. I didn't want, if you go to my YouTube, you can watch me play for 75 minutes straight if you want. But I wanted just the clips that were interesting. I wanted, it's solo saxophone, so I wanted it to still be approachable and, listenable, So that was the hardest part of this album, probably the editing process of going through and finding the little snippets and cutting them out.
I can only imagine. Wow. All right. No, thank you for that backstory. That is really interesting, and it didn't even occur to me too. I guess because the tunnel, because it's open necessarily, right? So I could see how the temperature, how the humidity, and boy, does New York get humid in the summer. People don't realize. I
Yeah,
know
absolutely. Yeah.
my hair shows it. So,
Right.
um, all right. So that's something that new that I learned. So I
Hmm.
actually had some questions. I think you kind of
Sure.
answered. These were then like free improvisations. They weren't compositions. It was just free improvisations.
They are, but the more I would do it, the more I'd be like, here's this theme that really works well, or that I'm working on, or like I would start here and it would always lead somewhere. You're improvising when you start and you're just looking for something to grab onto that you can make a theme. And then I try and make it like a piece, even though, sometimes people stop and listen, but mostly it's for me. So I would learn, okay, if I start to do this particular pattern, it'll lead me somewhere interesting that I can grab onto a melody and hang on to it and play with it for like 20 minutes instead of I'm trying not to noodle for like 30 minutes straight. So yeah, they're improvisations, but like when I perform this live, somebody asks, or when if I do a release card, I have ideas of like, okay, here's how it starts, or here is the idea, or here is a stupid saxophone trick I use to like, kick this off, or is the theme of it. Or, I haven't talked about a Shruti box, but like, I would bring a Shruti box to accompany myself. And so I would have different pitch sets that I would improvise with that I would do the same. So no, not compositions per se, because I think composition is probably more organized and more involved, but definitely ideas that I carry throughout. So it's not just completely free improvisation every time.
Okay, this is interesting, and that was another question I had too, because the Shruti box. And in
Mhm.
fact, you know what? Let me do this. I'm going to go to one of the tracks from the album. I
Sure.
have the audio, and actually, the one that I want to go to, give me 1 second to get the track listing, was going to be, where was this over here? Of course, when I want to find it, I can't see it. Oh, there we go. Drone Warfare.
Yeah, sure. That definitely has a drone involved with it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. So let's check out a little bit of Drone Warfare over
Sure.
here. And I'm going to get my volume a little bit louder so you all can hear it. Okay, this is really cool. You could definitely hear. So the Shruti box is providing that drone. So I guess you set it for like a pitch, like one
Right.
particular pitch.
So a Shruti box is originally it's an instrument from India, and it's really made for practicing like classical Indian vocal techniques, like classical Indian music, where you want a drone so you can do all the really crazy kind of things they do. Um, it's normally played by your hand. You sort of squeeze it. It's a bellows instrument, so it's what's known as a free reed. So it has like a metal reed that's actually vibrating, similar to what an accordion is or bandoneon. Or also during COVID, I got really into this instrument called the Conn, which I have one sitting in the corner. It's an instrument from Laos or Thailand. It's the same kind of reed that's vibrating, but this is just a different way. It has a bellows, you squeeze it. So it has these little knobs or little doors you open, and each door you open is a pitch. There are different types. You can get different octaves, different amounts of notes. Mine happens to be 12 notes, one octave. And you can open as many as you want. You could have all 12 droning at once. It would obviously use up the air really quickly, but you could. Generally, I do, two or three or four notes, whatever. And normally you would squeeze it, which doesn't lend itself to saxophone so easily. So actually, you can buy a foot pedal attachment. So I actually have it hooked up to a foot pedal. So I'm standing there, I'm playing, and I'm using my foot to push a pedal that pulls back the bellows, and then, or it squeezes the bellows rather, and the springing opens it. So I'm playing it with my foot and improvising. Other saxophonists have played with the Shruti box. I'm certainly not the first one. There's a guy whose name I believe is Hayden Chisholm, who he's an incredible saxophonist from Europe, and I don't know exactly where he is these days. He's from New Zealand, but he's living in Serbia. He sings with one, he plays one, he does some incredible stuff. A friend of mine, John DeLucia, I saw once play with a Shruti box as part of his performance. So it's not, I didn't invent it, but I was like, hey, I'm going to play alone in the park. Wouldn't it be nice to have a drone to play with? And I didn't, at first I would bring my phone or an iPad because there's drone apps. But I just didn't, the Shruti box made such a nicer sound, and it was also to be able to control the drone with the foot pedal just seemed really interesting. And yeah, this was COVID. Things were weird. It was a creative time. The more bored you are, the more creative you get, right? So I was making lots of stupid TikTok videos, but I was also thinking of cool things to do with all my free time because there were no gigs. And yeah, so I don't know. It's just something I want to do, and it's a beautiful sound, especially in a reverberant space where it played into the sound for me of the Shruti box.
But was it, it's so funny because you're kind of reading my mind. I'm thinking, wait a minute, if this is a bellows, how on earth is he playing it? So you answered that question with the foot
Yep.
pedal. So
Yep.
yeah, for sure. And what I also heard in the beginning of this, and I'm going to play this again in a second, but you know, you may have had an idea, or this was you free improvising, right? And you
hmm
were editing all this stuff, but you came up with this idea, and then you developed it.
hmm
And so I want to go back to the beginning of this for a second so
Sure.
that people can think about that. Hold on one second. I just made a massive mistake here. I want people to think about, what's going on with that, and go back to here. All right, on my Mac computer. Yeah, let me do a quick look here. Here we go. Let's take this from the top again. First statement. Okay, I heard a little bit of multiphonics, or was that just the interplay with the Shruti box?
Yeah, but good ears. There is, but that's actually it's not a multinaphonic fingering. That is a thing I got from this guy, Scott Robinson, who
Oh,
is
Scott Robbins. Okay.
one of my heroes and mentors. I would say mentor, but he doesn't teach, so I just go hang out with him. But he has this thing on, if you listen to him playing baritone, where he cracks a note a lot, especially like an F or in that thing. And it's something I listened to so carefully and I caught. It is technically a multiphonic, right? Because there's several notes, but it's really just like an intentional cracking of a note. And I actually don't use, I took off the spring on a couple of my octave keys. It causes it to often to crack more than not. And that's just a sound I love every time. I first heard him do it on so F with the octave key. So like middle F, F at the top of the staff. And I just love the sound. And I don't even think about it now anymore. It's just part of my like sound, especially when I'm playing softly. So yes, there is technically a multiphonic there, but it's not necessarily a super weird multiphonic fingering I figured out or anything like that. Also, I love multiphonics that are a little more consonant. A lot of times you'll hear them, they're very dissonant and rough sounding, but actually they can be just very subtle and beautiful. So yes, good ears on that.
We're going to talk about multiphonics in a second. But you said something. You took off the spring for the
Yeah.
the octave key.
Here I
Okay.
have a baritone saxophone here. I can.
Oh,
This always
so
when
the
people try my saxophone, this always throws them off.
okay, all right. Because I'm just thinking, if you took the spring off,
Uh-huh.
then does that make it harder? Does that mean the other notes can't play the?
So
Yeah.
especially on baritone, I find you don't actually need an octave key. You can play the whole range without an octave key. Higher notes are actually easier on baritone because they're not that high, right? Even my palm F is an alto's middle F. It's really not that high of a note. So every saxophone has two octave pips opening, right? We have an automatic octave system so that when you push the octave key, it switches between depending on what note you're playing. Older saxophones actually don't. They have two octave keys. I've got one sitting in the corner that has two octave keys, and it's not something you want to deal with. So the one I disable is actually the one farther down the body. So there's the one that would be on the neck. I play a Conn baritone, so the octave key is actually on the neck, just like it is for most altos and tenors, unlike some baritones where it's not. But this is the one up here. So there's a second octave key. So it's like just past the high E key on the baritone somewhere else. That one, I actually have the spring disengaged. It never opens. I don't ever use it. So from, whatever that range that would be, I think it's like D to G or something. That octave key doesn't exist. So when people try my saxophone, they often can't jump the octave because they're used to relying on the octave key, and I actually don't use it. And I don't think Scott disengaged his spring, but I know he does that sound. He made that sound, and I found a way that worked for me by monkeying with my saxophone, which don't do that at home, I guess.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So since you've done that, then you have to have tremendous control over your read. You have to be able to really,
Yeah,
yeah, and and voicing and whatnot, whereas,
voicing for sure. Yep.
yeah,
I mean,
okay,
that's right. I mean, the saxophone in a nutshell is voicing, especially if you want to work on altissimo, if you want to really sculpt the sound and everything, like putting your fingers in the right place. Sure, that's hard. We spent a lot of years figuring that out, but after that, it's more everything in the face, mouth. That's where the secret to high-end saxophone for me is the articulation, the voicing, everything. Like the fingers, that's such a small part of saxophone, I think, really. I mean, then again, I'm one of the people who doesn't play bebop in a million notes and do that stuff. So ask somebody else who does. I'll give you a different answer. But for me, sculpting the sound, like physically sculpting each note and the way it sounds and things like that, that's to me where that's the people I love and what I want to hear more so than like harmonic substitutions and straight, lots of eighth notes and all that kind of stuff, which is great. I'll listen to it, but it's not what really gets me going.
what's interesting that you're saying that sculpting the sound, even in the little excerpt that we shared here, and there's a
Hmm.
bunch more. Yeah, all right, I can hear you sculpting that sound.
Yeah, I
And
mean, when
that's
you're playing with a drone, I'm not playing a million notes. I'm playing long notes. I'll play a long note, and then as I'm playing that note, I want to shift. It's not just sometimes it's pitch, sometimes it's timbre, sometimes yeah. That's when I'm playing with a drone. That's you're putting different. I'm not superimposing harmony over. I'm not trying to play melodies over. I'm really just taking colors and putting a color on a color and subtly shifting this color until I find a combination that is gorgeous. Um, something like if you're doing long tones, people are often like bored while doing long tones. Like if you're bored doing long tones, you're doing them wrong. Your mind should be going a million miles an hour, thinking, how do I get this to sound right? Why doesn't that? How do I get this a little darker? How do I get this rounder? How do I do this? Well, let me change this. It's like long tones should be like constant adjustments. It shouldn't just be like sitting there playing a note, zoning out. So yeah, when I'm playing with the drone, especially, I feel like that's what I'm doing is really trying to find, even you could play the same note over and over the same drone, but you're just trying to get it sound better and better and better each time, even though it's the same note technically, right? So
yeah.
yeah, it's hard, but when you've got no gigs and you're in a Prospect Park tunnel at midnight, you've got time to do these things.
Well, the other thing too, and here's the thing, they don't have to buy a Shruti box. The listeners, you don't have to
Sure.
do that. But, there's plenty of apps that have drones. There's also
Yep,
YouTube, organ
for
drones. I
sure.
always recommend those. And that
Yes.
guy should give me some money because of all the thousands of people I've recommended it to. But
Right.
but
Absolutely.
that'll give you lots of ammo, lots of inspiration for sure.
Yeah. Hmm.
But so getting back to the drone warfare, yeah, when you just said sculpting your sound, absolutely. And the thing
Hmm.
too, what led me to this as well, it's the sculpting of the sound, but it's also, if we listen from the beginning again, the development of an
Hmm.
idea here.
Yeah.
Is the crack? Developing. and then playing with that pitch set. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could definitely hear this, like, the development
Yeah.
and
If I would think about my motif, I'm thinking about a resolution. So each time I'm trying to like
okay.
step as lightly onto down onto a stair as possible. That's what I'm thinking there. I'm like play something and then step down, play something else, step down. So each one of those themes is even if it's a run, I'm thinking about how to like land as gently as possible. That's kind of what I think was probably going on in my head when I hear myself play that again. That's a little bit more of a cerebral motif, but that's kind of what I'm thinking is a gentle landing each time, like almost like watching a dancer do this crazy thing and then just lightly step off.
It's
That would be sort of the theme I think I was thinking.
it's kind of like it's almost I'm kind of thinking that that's like advice for solo sax playing in a sense, because as you're developing themes, you
Yeah,
know, you're you're
yeah,
you're looking for landing points. And
sure.
for you and for you it's about a gentle landing point.
Yeah,
Where sometimes it could also be, it's not going to be a gentle landing point.
of
You may
course.
want to do
Yeah,
contrast and stuff like that
sure.
with
I
that.
mean, I do sometimes play a lot of avant-garde music. I wouldn't say I do as much as I used to. So I used to do a lot of free improvisation in like a group setting. And I studied with Tony Malaby at one point, whose music I love. And a lot of people when they play free, especially when they play a group, it all really sounds the same. And when free improvisation is good, it's the best thing in the world. But I think like 99% of it is terrible.
Oh, okay.
um,
Okay.
and one of the things that he pointed out that I think I noticed with a lot of people is that there's no sentence structure. There's no pausing. There's no like, this just happened. Let's move on to something else. Or leave giving space or like, here's a definitive statement. So yeah, I think especially when you're improvising freely, so to speak, even if there's some harmony or consonant sounds, I'm really trying to think, here's an intention, here's an idea. It's not just wiggling the fingers like, oh, cool, that sounded nice. So let's move on to like, so yeah, it's a similar mindset that I learned improvising in a group, having patience, having actual separated ideas, which is something I think I miss a lot when I hear free improvisation a lot of times, honestly. So
I'm also curious about this too. So when you're improvising solo sax, whether it's a group situation or by yourself, are you also thinking harmonically too, or are you thinking of just developing pitch sets?
it depends on the theme of the evening, or depends, like there are definitely times where I would go out and be like, wow, tonight is a D Aeolian minor night. That's just sounding really good, and I'm just going to mess with that scale. Other times it's like I have a rhythm I've intended, or there's just this weird sound that there's this one track I called Didgeridoo, which where I was playing a low C bass clarinet, and it started. I did this thing. I was like, that sounds like a didgeridoo. Cool. Let me do this for a while. It was like not quite a gimmick, but like a very instrument specific like sound that so sometimes it's that, sometimes it is very much a particular scale. Sometimes it's even I like to improvise on it's on there. I think there's a track. I had really fun with the titles of these tracks. Some of them are really dumb,
Saw
but
that.
Claire de Lune. I really love the piece Claire de Lune, and I'll improvise over a little bit of the harmony of Claire de Lune, just the three chords that move, or even the melody or things. So yeah, sometimes I am just improvising over an actual harmony. There's a couple standards on the album where I am playing a tune. I'm playing a standard. I do Out of Nowhere and Still by Starlight, where I'm loosely improvising over the form and the harmony. So it depends. Sometimes it is a pitch set. Sometimes it's a rhythmic thing. Sometimes it's a particular harmony. You know, whatever I feel that night. It changes. All these things I find interesting, and I'm again there are dozens of hours of recordings that didn't make the album that have other stuff too. So, and I still go. Even it's getting too cold now, but this past summer I was going as much as I could to play in that tunnel. So, yeah, all of the above could be a theme, could be an idea, could be something where I'm just trying to. And it changes. If I'm playing for 90 minutes, I'm probably not doing the same idea for 90 minutes. That'd be amazing. That's a great night if I can hang my hat on one thing for 90 minutes. But it's
Whoops.
probably changing and shifting, yeah, throughout the night.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. It went off. You're still sculpting, is what you're doing.
Yeah,
I think that's really the main theme so far is that it sounds like the way that you approach making music is this sculpting idea, whatever it may be that you're
yeah,
sculpting, whatever
mm,
um idea or concept. Let's didgeridoo.
Sure.
Let's play a little bit of this and let's see what's going on here. Bass clarinet. There's the didgeridoo. That is cool. That is really cool. And
Yeah.
what's really interesting, so I heard I almost sounded like two drumsticks coming together, but I'm not sure. There was one little
Prob-
like clack. Could it have been the keys? It's
Almost
captured.
certainly the janky key work on my clarinet making itself known. Yeah, yeah. And you can hear, I mean, I think that night I was working in a particular minor mode, and I was improvising around. And then I found that didgeridoo-ish sound, didgeridoo, and then I started to improvise from there. I included this roll-in before, so you can sort of hear me stumble into that idea. And then if you listen to the rest of this track, a lot of it is playing around with that wild. And it's not just, if I did that on a bass clarinet in this room I'm in, you wouldn't necessarily hear that. You would hear, with I don't know, perfect pitch was a C or C sharp. It's a low note on the bass clarinet. You'd hear it and you'd hear the rhythm, but it wouldn't have that didgeridoo-esque quality. That comes from the tunnel and the reverberation and just what was happening that night and the way that note was reverberating in the space and time there. It was, and it's, I could go try it again and maybe I could do it. It might be a different note on a different night. It might be a half step shifted or whatever, depending on
Oh
everything.
wow.
So yeah, I liked how you can sort of hear me stumble into that idea and then like grab onto it, and then the improvisation revolves around that idea. You hear me circle around the idea, grab it, and go.
Yeah, the development, absolutely. And for
Mm,
some people, they may not be able to hear this, but I think others definitely can. But I absolutely can hear that. And
yeah.
have you tried to play in that tunnel in the daytime in like winter?
Um, Not recently. Like in life, I have, not in winter. Again, playing outside in the winter is real hard. During COVID, I had to do a few gigs outside, but yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's definitely not warm in that tunnel and it's dark. No, I haven't, and I'm sure it would be very different.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's beautiful about that tunnel is, and I played in a lot of the tunnels in Prospect Park. I found the other ones are pretty, they don't change from night to night as much. I don't
Wow.
know if something about either the length of this tunnel or the shape of it, how it tends to change more than maybe others do. There's a tunnel right nearby. It's like a 3-minute walk away, and I played in there a few times, and it's cool, but I just don't find it like I can't. If you walk 3 feet in this tunnel, everything changes. You'll even on this album, you'll hear sometimes footsteps because I'm literally walking around, finding the different frequencies. I mean, from a recording perspective, it's terrible, right? Because I have generally one microphone, and you hear me, sometimes doing fades out, sometimes, because it's one guy in a tunnel with a microphone, right? Like this is not a studio recording. You can hear the insects chirping. You hear planes. You hear people walking through. There's a car that drives through at one point. You hear planes. Um, but yeah, that it was yeah. I never get bored of going there because it's different every time.
Okay, I have a bunch of thoughts, and the first thing I'm thinking about is people are going to be listening to this, and we were like, I got to get to that tunnel, and then now you're going to
Sure.
have competition in the tunnel. So that's the first
It's
thing.
already a popular tunnel for people playing. So
Oh, it
yeah,
is.
I mean, fortunately at night, nobody's nutty enough to play there usually. I've only ever once gone at night and not been able to play there. There is actually one tunnel in Prospect Park I've never played in, because every time I've gone, there's been somebody sleeping in there, unfortunately, and I don't have the gall to just start playing saxophone. It was one I've never played in. But yeah, at night, from 11 p.m. on, I'm usually the only one that wants to be there. But no, yeah, during the day, you'll see other people busking, playing there. Absolutely,
Okay.
it's a super accessible part of the park. Again, it's not like the main thoroughfare, but it's not super hard to find. So yeah, people play there for sure.
You could always do Twinkle Twinkle for the other tunnel,
Yeah,
just like,
right,
or any kind of
right.
nighttime music. But you should have a tunnel series, like this
Yeah,
this album's from this tunnel, this one's from the other one, this is from the other one. I don't
good.
know, just saying,
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
in all silliness.
I
But
mean, there's all sorts of ones in Central Park that are great that I don't get to because I live in Brooklyn. But yeah, and then honestly, I don't have an album release show lined up, but I want to take this music. I've been trying to find reverberant spaces. So churches. I visited this government bunker in Canada outside of Ottawa where the government would have gone in the case of nuclear war. It's shut down now. It's a museum, but they have this vault, which is just a huge concrete room. And I was like, I really want to play saxophone here. So to play in somewhere like, yeah, so like I want to take this idea and it's just me and a couple instruments in a shruti box to play in some reverberant spaces. There's this cistern system in Texas, I think it's in Houston, called the Buffalo Park system. So it's this underground. It used to hold millions and millions of gallons, and now it's sort of been drained. They don't use it. And I would really like to play there. There's like a tour guide that sings in there and shows everybody the residents of it. But I would love to do this there. So, hey, if anybody's listening and you know reverberant space, I would love to come do it. It's very affordable because it's just me. But yeah, this is something. Ideally, if I did a concert, though, I'd want to show up an hour early and check out, see like, okay, where do I stand? How does,
Oh yeah.
I can't do that while playing. If I'm doing a performance for people, I might have an inkling of what's happening beforehand, unless you just want to watch a guy figure it out in real time.
Yeah, well,
But
that
yeah,
may be interesting though,
could
honestly.
be. Yeah.
What I'm interested in too, before we listen to another track, so you said one microphone. So what
Mhm.
was your setup for recording?
Um, Different things on different nights, but I think the one that was the most successful, I just have COVID happened, right? And so everybody ran out and quickly bought microphones and like an interface. I would bring a laptop. I don't remember what laptop it was, but I have a Focusrite. It's just a very simple
Oh, okay.
interface. I can show you the microphone right here. This AT40, no,
Oh,
AT2020 large
oh,
diaphragm
okay.
condenser microphone.
All right.
It's like the go-to affordable great microphone. It's good for spaces. I literally brought this with what it's attached to, this red Focusrite and a laptop, and I just I put it in trying sort of a neutral space, although honestly it would be closer to the wall of the tunnel because again, people are walking through the tunnel or riding their bike, whatever. So I'd sort of put it, but usually I would put it where I was used to standing because I knew it would sound good there. And again, some nights I recorded and it just didn't sound good, like you can't hear the tunnel. As much as I like the sound of this album, I don't think it actually sounds as reverberant as being in the tunnel itself. You get the decay is even longer when you're in the tunnel. It's even more incredible to be in the tunnel and hear this. I think it's kind of like an orchestra recording. Like orchestra can sound amazing on a record, but if you stand in the middle of an orchestra, it is so loud and intense and power. It's so no record reflects how intense an orchestra is. People think of classical music as like tame. A full-on orchestra is like louder than most rock bands, like if you're standing in the middle of it. So just to say that like I did this and maybe with a super high-end recording setup I could have captured more of it, but hey, it was COVID. It was just me in a tunnel. Part of this whole album concept is it's solo win. So I was also the recording engineer. I did take it to a mastering engineer who fixed it up and did some things and I was able to fix a few things that I needed. But for the most part, I did the actual recording just on that. So
Yeah, no, and yeah, I have an Audio Technica myself. I forget what
mhm.
number this is, but anyway, I've got this one too, and I've had it for a while. They're great mics.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking though, like if you ever, I'm sure you will, if you do more projects like this,
Hmm.
maybe there's ways where someone can help you and have a few mics to capture more of that decay. It sounds like you
Right.
captured quite a bit,
Yeah.
from this, but just having that in mind for the future. People maybe
I'm
might
sure.
get
Yeah.
inspired.
Yeah. They're. I'm sure an actual audio engineer with proper equipment could get much closer to the real live sound for sure. Yeah.
Wow, okay. And then I'm curious too. You said, you're very close to the park, but
Mhm.
um you're carrying heavy horns. Okay, so
Yeah.
you didn't walk, did you? How did you get your
Um,
horns to that tunnel? That's my question.
Often, like especially in COVID, where nobody was taking the train, I absolutely did. It's probably about 2 miles from. I'm in my practice space now, where I was living during COVID. This is an apartment I've been in for years. And yeah, it would be. And there was one night where I walked with a bass saxophone. It has wheels, thankfully. I've
Oh,
actually got it right
okay.
here in front of me. So I wheeled. But even 2 miles wheeling a bass saxophone, I was, yeah. I
That's
may have even brought a baritone and a bass saxophone, or maybe a bass clarinet or something. I don't know. I also, with the bass clarinet, I've got the one backpack strap. You can ride a bike. I don't ride a bike with a baritone, but I can do it with a bass clarinet. There's a subway stop not far away. So nowadays, I would probably just take the subway and walk. It's like a 10-minute walk in from the subway stop. I'm also used to carrying big instruments. I mean, it's the plight of a baritone saxophonist. It's just you carry heavy stuff, and I don't like to use wheels because I don't think it's great for the saxophone. So I carry it wherever I go. I try and get a light case, use backpack straps, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah.
But yeah, a lot of carrying instruments. I would especially in summer if it was hot, I would bring, a huge thing of water. I'd have my shooty box. I'd have an instrument. I'd have bug spray 'cause the mosquitoes were vicious sometimes. Yeah, it was like a whole setup I would bring. And actually, I forgot this, but I would go and the limiting factor I would play, and no comps aren't going to come you arrested at 1 a.m. if you're just playing saxophone in a park, even though technically the park closed. My limiting factor was when I ran out of water. When I had no more water, I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm going home. If that was an hour, great. If that was 3 hours, okay. That was like my limiting factor of going to play in that park.
I thought the limiting factor, honestly, would be when you were recording when your laptop ran out, you know?
For recordings, yeah, the recordings happen a little bit later, when I like, hey, I am actually going to make an album. Let me do this. I have, some recordings from before that aren't quite as professional. I won't reveal which ones on the album, but they may or may not have been recorded on a slightly less professional setup. Um, but yeah, the later on, like I knew I played bass saxophone a bunch, but I didn't really have any good recordings, so I did go back with bass saxophone in this proper setup and do that. So that was probably a shorter period. Yeah, I don't. Although honestly, with laptops these days, one microphone and an interface, it's not taking up that much juice. You could do a couple hours, no problem.
That's cool. That's really cool. I was really curious about that. All right, let's
Yeah,
let's do another track from here. And actually,
sure.
God, there's so many here, but you know what? I
Yeah, they're short, so I was able to include a lot of them.
the names are just awesome. But you
I
know
had
what?
a lot of fun with the names. Yeah,
I want to hit the Conn Bone anniversary. So this is
sure.
you
I
on
can
bass
explain that
sax.
one. That's actually very relevant to today, and I'll talk about that. Yeah.
Yes. So let's hit a little bit of this one here. There's your multiphonics. That's really cool. Where that you could hear the resolution there. That's so cool. And then you're exploring that. Oh, okay, this is interesting. And
Yeah, there's
then
some
you really
harmonic
love.
resolutions within the multiphonics for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, talk about the story with this, and then we got to ask about like, people are going to want to know
Sure.
multiphonics. How do I do it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's bass saxophone I'm playing there. So all of my saxophones are generally Conn, with the CG Conn. It was an American corporation who I've fallen in love with the history of, and I know way too much about the history. And I was learning about the history more during this too. And actually, today is Adolf Sax's birthday, but it's also Conn, which is now Conn Selmer, which is a sort of corporation that owns the name Conn. And they actually just re-released a Conn saxophone, an alto saxophone today. They're calling it the 150th Conn anniversary. That's a little bit loose with the dates because yes, so 1875 was technically when C.G. Conn, the guy, went into business, but at that point he was just making sort of cornet mouthpieces. So calling it the 150th Conn anniversary is a bit of a stretch. They really didn't start making saxophones till like the early 1900s. But anyways, my saxophones are all Conn. That starts from the baritone, where I really found that Conn baritone was my sound. A lot of that comes from this guy, Scott Robinson, also Harry Carney. Both played low B flat Conn baritones. Jerry Mulligan did. Growing up, Gary Smalling. All these people, I love their sound. They were playing low B flat Conn, so I eventually found my way to the Conn, which is, I don't play old saxophones just because I like old. I play the Conns because they have a larger bore and a different sound. If somebody made a modern Conn, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, Conn Selmer, baritone, I would probably happily play it because it wouldn't be falling apart and the keywork would be better, et cetera, et cetera. But I found myself playing Conn instruments, and I love the history of Conn. It's all wrapped up into the history of like music education in this country. Like Conn was the one that created summer music camps essentially, and they did a lot of work to create music education and get it into the schools across the world. Music education doesn't exist in schools as much. It's a kind of an American phenomenon, and at the younger level. And Conn has a lot to do with that. And it's just a very interesting history. But anyways, my saxophones are 100 years old generally. I think the bass saxophone might be, I don't know, forget it was 1925 or 1926. My baritone, I have one that's 1925 alto. So they're about 100 years old, right? So I'm thinking about anniversaries, like there's different anniversaries. There's like the silver anniversary, the gold anniversary, different years have different. There's not really officially a 100-year anniversary because nobody has a 100th anniversary of marriage or whatever. But there's extrapolations online. If you look, the bone anniversary is what some people call the 100-year anniversary. So I was like, okay, well, I've got these Conn horns. I'm playing in this tunnel. It's a 100 years old horn. It's the Conn bone anniversary, not to be confused with the Conn trombone bone. And
That's
then
what I was
another
thinking.
interesting
Okay.
thing, this tunnel is actually over 100 years old. This tunnel is from the late 1800s. So it's actually about the same. It's probably almost as old as the guy Conn himself. And there's all these over 100-year-old things involved. So I'm playing a bass saxophone that's 100 years old in that recording in a tunnel that's almost 150 years old. And so, yeah, I was thinking about that, and the title there, Bone Anniversary, would be the 100th anniversary
That that's
material.
that's awesome. That is so funny. And just as a reminder for the listeners too, I had spoken with the National Saxophone Museum,
Oh,
and
great.
yeah, there's that podcast episode. We'll put
Hmm.
the I'm going to put the link in the show notes as I'm making a note
Right.
right now. But yeah, no, there's a lot with this, and let's talk about this particular piece, and you're developing it, and you've got the
Hmm.
background and all that kind of thing. But we
Yeah,
also do have to talk about something else in a second, and I'm just going to
sure.
make a note with that so I don't forget. So you're starting off. Let me start this in the beginning again. And there's again this sculpting thing
Hmm.
going on,
Yep.
but it's also these resolutions of each of these little themes, and you're
Yep.
you're looking for the resolution, right?
Yes.
So I want to put that in listeners' minds for a second. Listen to each theme and think where do you feel it needs to go next? That's what you want to think. Let me go back to here. Okay. The four chord. And then that right there, right? It's like
Yep.
waiting for it. Where's it
Hmm.
going? It's going there.
Exactly. Yep.
That's really cool. And let's talk about multiphonics then, because
Sure.
it's probably easier to do on a larger instrument, a larger mouth.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
something people don't realize is the larger the instrument, the easier the multiphonics are. And I couldn't tell you from a physics perspective why that is. Bass saxophone, especially, it's just they're like there. You can just play any note, and if you voice it, you can just get all these multiphonics to come out. And you know, multiphonics are based on the overtone series, right? So especially the first 5 or 6 of the overtone series, it's all diatonic, right? It's 1 1 5 3 1. So it's like a major triad. If you're not getting into the upper partials, it's very consonant sounding. So you can play these multiphonics that are just basically, I'm playing, if you practice overtones, say you finger low B flat and you're playing all your different overtones, I'm getting it so I'm playing all my overtones at once. So I'm getting the fundamental, the B flat up an octave, the F above that, the B flat above that. If you're really lucky, the D above that. You've got a major triad. So you're playing a major triad, a B flat major triad, all at once. It's doable on baritone. It's even more doable on bass saxophone. I don't know if it's because the distance, the physical distance between notes, right? The actual wavelength is larger, so maybe it's easier to do more in this. This is a question for a physicist or an acoustician, but it's absolutely easier on bass saxophone, especially if you want to do consonant ones. There's all sorts of ones you can do in alto and tenor, no problem. Put this finger, do this, lift this finger, and you get this crazy screech, which is 2 notes and very dissonant and very harsh. I play those. I know those. I love those. But to do the more constant ones where you're just stacking overtones, and by overtones, I don't mean like every note has overtones. I mean the overtone series. So I'm usually fingering a lower note, like B flat or B or C or something like that, and I'm changing my inner head,
Oral cavity.
throat,
Yeah.
oral cavity, all that stuff to push the air such that I can get multiple notes to resonate at once. Often it's just it's easiest on the lowest notes. It's often in B flat. So that's what's happening there. And then if you've got a B flat triad, you can resolve to the four chords, so E flat. So if you just
Right.
you can, and then E flat appears in several different overtone series. So whether it's the fundamental is E flat or whether the fifth is E flat, or you can sort of play around that kind of stuff. And also there's all overlap, right? Because if you're doing the E flat overtone series, B flat is in there. You can do these harmony things and switch. So this one, like I had sort of worked out. This is something I've practiced, but also I'm sort of improvising. I'm sort of saying, oh, I'm doing this, do this, this. Okay, I've resolved. And then I know if I change to this fingering, I can get a different multiphonic that would resolve in a certain way. Doesn't always work out. This
Sure,
is
sure.
this is one you're hearing the recording where I think it went well that night. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Colin Stetson as an influence on me as a bass saxophonist. Colin Stetson is, I think, has done more for the bass saxophone than anybody since Adrian Rollini, who's the first, the original bass saxophonist. Colin Stetson is more in like the indie rock arena, but he does solo saxophone. He'll actually do these. If people listening don't know Colin Stetson, it goes into Colin Stetson. I have another track which I think I call "Putting on a Stetson Hat" because as a reference to Colin Stetson. He
Gotcha.
does these overtone roll things. He does solo saxophones where he'll put actual microphones on himself so he can sing. So you're hearing him sing, and he also puts percussion mics on the saxophone, so you're hearing the click, 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 and he just does these insane circular breathing, long, very cool, very intense solo saxophone performances. They're very percussive, they're very moving, they're very powerful. And he does things on bass saxophone that are like out of this world. And it was a big influence on me, so especially hearing him do some of the multiphonics he did on bass saxophone, I was like, oh, let me explore that. Um,
That's
yeah, so he's a big influence, especially outside of the jazz world. I went to jazz school, I played a lot of jazz, but he's an influence that I would say sort of an offshoot from jazz. I think he has some jazz background. That's definitely not the world he lives in these days.
right. And okay, so there's a lot of things here, and I want to go back to, how it's quote unquote easier to do
Hmm.
multiphonics on the lower sounding instruments. And
Sure.
the interesting thing for a lot of people who play alto and tenor, this is why where you fit in the series, in the overtone series, you're fitting in the higher end. Like
Hmm.
tenors, like, kind of in the middle-ish per se, but altos in the higher end, certainly sopranos higher than that. And that's why the multiphonics, you can't, it's much harder to get that consonant kind of sound. Because I
Sure.
play trumpet, so I know about this because this is all we do is we do these
Me
lip
too for the
syncs.
last year. I've been learning.
Oh, awesome, cool, that's good, yeah. So yeah, so that
Yeah,
yeah. So you're
right.
going through the overtone series. It's consonant to a certain point, like you said
Yep.
before, and then the notes get closer and closer and closer together. They're more out of
Yep.
tune. You start to get
Right.
to sharp 11s,
Yep.
all that
All
kind of
that stuff. Yep.
jazz. Yeah, that's why
Absolutely.
that happens. So that's a really cool that's a cool reminder of how that works per se. But since you mentioned Colin Stetson, hold on, let me find yeah, wearing a Stetson hat. Let's just check
Yeah.
this out for a second. This almost reminds me of the thought of like a Bach cello suite.
Yeah. I
You know
mean,
what I mean?
it's especially, yeah. I mean, yeah, same feeling. I'm by playing quick runs, and especially in a reverberant space, you are establishing a harmony, right? Those notes are ringing out, just like a cello, which we can't do on saxophone, but a cello can let those strings ring. So
Yeah.
you can play harmony on a cello. You can play just like a guitar. The reason a guitar can play harmony is they have multiple strings. So even though they're playing a different note, that one string is still ringing. With the help of a reverberant tonal, you can do things like this. And again, it's all very diatonic. The Bach cello suites are all very diatonic, right? And there's some harmony movement I'm doing, but again, it's not trying to play super harsh harmonies of things. So yeah, the feeling that you hear with a Bach cello suite, I would love if that's the same feeling you get from some of this. Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. And I'm wondering too, you know, you mentioned Colin in terms of like the percussive sounds. Has Derek Brown been an influence on you?
Um, it's very much a different thing and a different style. I appreciate I mean, I love stupid saxophone. I call them, it's like a sort of derogatory phrase, but it's actually something I love. I call them stupid saxophone tricks, right? Extended technique is I keep a list on the Jazz Bari sax site. I run other places, and I've done master classes where I just talk about extended technique. And some of my biggest TikTok videos were like how to play saxophone without playing saxophone, because people love all the crazy things you can do. So I can appreciate what he does incredibly. From like a stylistic point of view, he's taking extended techniques and really applying them to like established music, playing like a group, playing like funk, doing all this, which is cool. It's not what I want to do. Like, so for me, yes, I love him, but it's more an appreciation of like, wow, that is crazy hard to do on the saxophone, and
What
I
he's
love it.
doing. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I mean. That's what I
In
mean.
terms of do I want to play what he's playing? Not as much. But I can't absolutely do any of what he does, and some of the stuff he does is phenomenal. So from a sheer love of the actual instrument, I'm astounded. I will happily listen
That's
to him. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
that's what I was thinking actually. It wasn't so much the style. I was thinking
Yeah.
about, the influence of what he's done to
Yep.
transform saxophone playing and,
Yep.
transform the instrument, to the point where like P. Moriat like created his, a saxophone for him where you can, it has all the extra whistles and bells,
Yep.
instead of
Yep.
used to tell me that he used to his saxophone is his initial saxophone so beat up from all the ring banging
Bet.
and all that
I
kind of
bet.
thing going
I
on
bet.
there.
Yep. Yep.
Now, I want to go back to something that we were talking about before we started taping. You've got really old instruments,
Yes.
and that's really hard to repair, right?
Can
So
be. Yeah.
we talked about and my most recent episodes is with Paul Maslin in the
Hmm.
Chicago area, and you're like, oh
Yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So can you give us a little bit about your background first, and then
Sure.
talk about like your connection with Paul?
Yeah. So I grew up outside of Chicago in the northern suburbs. I am a product of music education in the United States. I took up, I actually ended up taking up an instrument a little bit early because my brother had already taken it up, so I wanted to, get ahead of the curve. I started on flute, which is unusual, and I still play flute. Um, but yeah, in middle school or whatever it was, fourth grade, fifth grade, started playing in the band, doing all that stuff, and you know, I wanted to play in jazz band again, mostly I think because my brother did it, not because I had a particularly good ear for it or loved it. And then at some point, I think it was either seventh or eighth grade, probably eighth grade. I don't know. The band director handed me a Jerry Mulligan CD, probably because he needed a baritone player and he wanted me to play baritone because there's never enough baritone players. But that was the first time I'd ever heard music that I like really connected with. I never listened to music as a kid before that. I I just really didn't. It's very strange given that I ended up being a musician, but I really didn't listen to music before the age of like 12 or 13. Like I'd heard music. I was playing in band, playing in jazz band before school. I didn't listen to music. I didn't connect to it. And that was the first time where I played that album, in a CD Discman over and over and over. There was a bus ride. We went down to like downstate Illinois, and I remember the whole 4 hour bus ride. I just played that CD over and over.
Wow.
And so I got hooked on baritone saxophone. Jerry Mulligan was my introduction. There's you can't quite see him, but there's a picture of Jerry Mulligan somewhere around here.
Okay.
He's up there on that wall somewhere. um, he was my intro. These days he's not my super cup of tea. I like his sound. His playing, it's a little blasé for me, but I'll, obviously I was all about him for a long time. That's how I got into the baritone saxophone. Um,
Interesting
so
though,
yeah, started
you
playing.
played flute. Interesting though, you played flute.
Yep.
And then, it's interesting how you resonated, no pun intended, but
Yep.
resonated with the Barry sax.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was playing flute. I don't know that I liked it because it was something special I did, but I don't know that I was like all about the sound of flute.
Okay.
And they actually wouldn't let, so the reason I had to take up saxophones, they wouldn't let flutes in the jazz band,
That's right.
which is
That's right.
something they still tell kids, which is bonkers because especially with like Sibelius and whatever else now, like how hard is it to pump out a flute part? Let the kids play viola, whatever. Any kid should be able to play any instrument they want in jazz band. There's no excuse anymore. But back then, if you had set charts, music teachers are already overworked. They don't have time. Oh, yeah, I'll write you out a flute part from the album. Like nobody's gonna do that. So they were like, no, you want to be in jazz band, you got to play saxophone. So I took up saxophone, and oddly, I didn't switch. I played both. I still played flute in like the concert band. Um, so I've been playing flute continuously for well, I don't know, like 30 years now. But then I took up saxophone in addition, and then started alto and worked my way to baritone. And then yeah, I went to high school. I went to a really big high school with a great music program. I have other qualms with this high school and its lack of diversity, but it had 4 jazz bands and they were phenomenal. They were very
Wow.
competitive and everything. Yeah, it was very large, very well known. It's called New Trier. It's in the northern suburbs of Illinois, and a lot of people are familiar with it. and it was great. And that's where I really fell in love with like the community, the jazz band community. There was a guy, Jeff Susdo, who I'm still friendly with, thankfully to this day, who was a senior in high school and I was a freshman. And he really like, I was terrible. I walked into jazz band freshman year and I like, couldn't play. I was so bad. He took me under, his wing and like showed me a few things and like got me started. And I realized like, oh man, I need to practice. Like I wasn't really practicing before then. So anyways, the community there was lovely. That's where I found my people in high school. I lived in the music building. I did all that. And that from there on out, like I'd already known like music is what I do. I never really made the choice like, hey, do I want to be a musician? Yeah, I should do that. It was always like music was my identity. It's who I hung out with. It's what I thought about myself as doing. At some point in high school, I was like, oh, if you want to do this, you're terrible and you need to start getting good at it. So I realized in high school, like, okay, I need to get a different teacher. I need to start practicing. I need to get serious about this. And I did get serious in high school. So Paul there was a sax, the band, Evanston Band and Orchestra, or the sax shop. It was, where you went to get your reeds and buy stuff. And I think where I got my first flute. But Paul was working out of his house at that point. And, word of mouth, I had gotten a nice saxophone in high school. Finally, I got a Selmer Mark 6, towards the end of high school. And like, I wasn't going to take it to the local, whatever. Somebody was like, no, this is a good saxophone. Take it to Paul Maslin. So somebody gave me his number and I went to his basement and he was really, really generous and kind. Like I was freaking out because like the lacquer was starting to come off and I was like, ah, and he was like, listen, just play the saxophone. Don't worry about it. You like talked me down off the off the ledge. I still have that baritone saxophone. And he fixed it for me and he really helped me sort of like, he was really kind. He did some good repairs for a very reasonable amount of money. He actually even let me, he won't remember this because he may not even remember who I am. I've seen him through the years a little bit, but he even showed me a little bit of repair. Like I used to go, when he did start his shop at Evanston, I would actually go hang out for an hour or two here and there, and he would let me watch him, not necessarily teaching me, but he was kind enough to let this high school kid sit there and just see what he was doing. And I did get into repair a little bit, enough to know that I didn't want to do it professionally, but I still do a lot of my own. Can't see here, but there's all sorts of tools and
Okay.
I've got all sorts of things. You can work on a saxophone, a torch, and I
Okay.
do my own leaks and stuff and corks and stuff. So I met Paul, and he had a business partner at the time, Greg Fishman, who's an educator. He writes a lot of books. I studied with Greg in high school and got pretty serious about it. Greg and Paul had like a co-studio at some point. Actually, I was mostly going to Greg's house. So I just got more and more serious during high school. I ended up going to New York for college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I am a product of the music education system of Illinois, and Paul Maslin was one of the people I met along the way who was really helpful and, just also just kept me interested in the saxophone along the way. So it was really cool this morning to actually pull up the YouTube and see that you had interviewed him. He's such a wealth of knowledge and so reasonable. There's a lot of saxophone repairmen that have very crazy ideas about stuff. For like, oh, well, you have to do this and this, and he's always like, yeah, just try it. That's the best way. So I appreciate how he's not so in his head about like, oh, well, you need this serial number of this year, everything else is trash. Don't, he's like, yeah, does the saxophone sound good? Great. It's good saxophone.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, very nice man. And I've interviewed Greg Fishman at
Hmm.
NAM, but also on the podcast as well. And
Great.
Greg is just incredible. And so that explains a lot. If you study with Greg, then you know your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he was so ahead on it. Like this was back in the late 90s. He would record every lesson. You had to bring a blank CD, right? You had to come to your lesson, bring the lesson check, your saxophone, and a blank CD because he would record every lesson in real time and give it to you. You had a CD with a lesson on it, which is amazing back now. Sure, you could do it on your phone, but like that was incredible. I don't know that I made full use of that back in the day, like to go back and listen to lessons, but he was showing me stuff I totally didn't grasp. Like I was struggling to keep up. He was going a mile a minute telling me about all this altered harmony, and I was just like, what's the major scale now? What now? But he is a great teacher, and he has very interesting ways of describing things. I really like his books. I don't teach a lot, but when I do use his books a lot. I think they're better than a lot of the books out there, and he is a very smart man, right? The way he thinks about harmony and can explain things. He is a teacher. He has learned how to teach. I don't know how to teach. I've never learned how to teach. A big complaint I have about a lot of musicians is they teach because they have to, not because they know how or they're good at it.
That's
He
true.
actually has sat down and thought about, I have this knowledge. How do I make this knowledge available to you in a way you can understand it? that is teaching, right? But a lot of people just learn the harmony and they're like, oh, sure, I'll just teach it to the kids. But like, just knowing it doesn't mean you know how to teach it. But Greg has worked out a system. He's a very good teacher, so as well as a great player.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about that. And, so here's the thing. So you grew up in Chicago area. You went to New
Hmm.
York for college. Obviously, you
Yep.
stayed since
Yep.
that point. So, but what I'm curious about, so who fixes your horns now, or do you fix your horns? Because that's
That,
a useful skill during COVID, I
sure.
gotta say. I was
Oh
just
yeah.
thinking to myself, yeah.
Well, and I mean, I'd be embarrassed to tell you how many instruments I have, so I can't get them all fixed all the time. That's just not going to happen. So who fixes my horn? It's different every year. I mean, Bill Singer, if I could just pick one repairman I love, Bill Singer is amazing. He used to be in Midtown, you could just go see him. Now he works out of his house in New Jersey. It's a little harder. So do I go see Bill? Sure. As often as I'd like? No, because it's a little harder to get to him. He's not retired, but I think rightfully he's doing the stuff he wants to do more so than so he's a little harder to get to, but he's still amazing. And I love that Bill, you go to some saxophone repairman shop and they have a tool for everything. There's a screwdriver for this, a screwdriver for this pliers is for springs. This plier is for swing. Bill has like a sawed-off spoon, an alcohol torch, and like one screwdriver, and he does everything with that. And it's amazing. Your horn plays incredible, and he's all about just restoring it to the way the horn was. He's not adding new things. He can do adjustments. Add an articulated G sharp if you want. Mostly, he's just like, let me get this horn playing the way it should, and he was affordable and he likes to talk. If you go to see Bill and you need an hour's worth of work, you book 2 hours because an hour of it you're just going to be chatting, and then he'll do the hour work. So I love Bill Singer. There's a guy who used to be in this neighborhood. I'm in Ditmas Park right now, and he used to work out of his kitchen, but now he has an actual spot in Dumbo called the Sax Kitchen. Mario Scaramuzza, he's incredible. Such a nice guy. He's done a lot of work for me, especially my bass saxophone, my tenor, my baritone. There's other people, there's actually a bunch of people in New York that I really like. Do I go to them regularly? Not necessarily, because for whatever reason, but they're good. Noah Leibowitz in Midtown Music, he's solid. He'll hook me up if I'm in between shows and I need to fix. There's this guy, Michael Norsworthy, who does mostly clarinets, but he does a great job on saxophones. He's in Industry City. Those are the people I'm forgetting too. There's also other repairmen that I just haven't been to, but I'm sure are good.
I'm thinking about for like the bass sax, like the really old instruments,
Yeah,
because do you feel that, you definitely need a repair person that has
sure.
experience, when it
Yeah,
comes to dealing with those instruments and also
yeah.
the parts. Do you
Yeah,
have difficulty getting parts?
yeah, they can be a pain. I mean, honestly, if you fix enough old saxophones, you're going to be making your own parts at some point.
Oh,
Actually, speaking
wow.
of another repairman, I just shipped off. I have an old Conn Alto with this microtuner, and the microtuner is all sorts of messed up and is a crack. And I shipped it off to this guy, Brendan Logan, I think he's in Pennsylvania, just to see, hey, could you fix it? Nobody else seems to be able to fix it. But yeah, and he's probably going to have to make a part for it. But he does all sorts of lathe work and that. Yeah, that's something.
Wow.
Also, especially this baritone I have next to me, I'm a little less precious about. It's kind of a Frankenstein horn. It was already stripped at one point. I had Mario put on an articulated G sharp. I might at one point, the F to G sharp connection doesn't have any screws like every modern horn does, which drives me insane because as soon as that cork compresses, all of a sudden it's leaking. I would love to get screws put in there, some other stuff. I have all these key risers glued on there. I've bent the keys all to fit my fingers. It's got a different neck. I've really. But in terms of repair for small stuff, honestly, I have a leak light, and
Just do it
from
yourself.
Paul and Bill Singer, I studied some repair enough to like, I can fix a leak. I can replace the pad, not probably as well as they can. I wouldn't do an overhaul. I won't fix springs because that's such a nightmare. I don't do dent work. But yeah, put on corks, felts, fix a leak here and there. I will absolutely do it myself just to save me time and money. At both wherever I practice, I've always got a leak light and the basics of repair. I'm also handy. I love fixing things. Like I'll fix a dishwasher, no problem. I'll fix it, whatever.
That's
So,
cool.
I like tools. I like that stuff. So I'm not afraid to get in there and fix that. But my rule is I don't do anything that a good repairman couldn't undo. So I'm not, soldering anything or bending anything or that kind of stuff. And absolutely, I have absolutely tried to fix a saxophone and brought it to Bill Singer and be like, Bill, help.
No, that's a great rule, and I think too that first of all, it certainly helped you during COVID, right? Because you
Yeah,
couldn't go to repair people, or
sure.
it was pretty restricted. But
Yep.
but especially because you're playing older horns. I think
Hmm.
that, it's definitely helpful to have that. And, what I wanted to talk about, I'm just going to switch gears a little bit. You run the Jazz Bari sax site. So
Sure.
can we
Yep.
talk a little bit about that?
Happy to.
When did
It's
it
something I've
start?
been doing for a long time.
Okay.
So that is also related to growing up in the Chicago area. So when I grew up, I stayed with different people and a lot of saxophonists, but I there were no baritone players. There was like one guy in downtown Chicago that I like met, but I never really studied him. There was no dedicated baritone player around. So I really missed that because there are some things that are specific to baritone that sure you can learn saxophone, but also there's some things where you need to learn that are only relevant on baritone or you need special attention on baritone. And I'm all about baritone saxophone. I really am trying to push baritone saxophone to be as popular or as widely used as alto and tenor or everything else. And not just something that like some alto and tenor players own and play. Like to me, if you want to be a baritone player, doubling on it is great. That's no problem. But if you want to actually have a baritone sound, to me, you've got to really focus on it. I feel the same way about soprano. If you want to play soprano saxophone, I think it should be like all you do, or most of what, or at least half, anyways.
Yeah.
So that site, it existed on the internet. As I was a kid, it was a GeoCities or a website for a long time. It
Okay.
wasn't called Jazz Bari Sax. It was, I forget what it was called. And they just had some, they had like a little bio about Jerry Mulligan, some other stuff, and just things I went to. It was how I found out about Pepper Adams, probably, or like Lars Golan, or maybe some of these other people that nobody told me about because maybe Greg Fishman did. I don't remember, but like I found out some more about the baritone saxophone through that. Fast forward to a little bit later when I'm out of college, I had learned some web development, web design skills in college. So I was working as a web designer when I was out of college. So it was sort of how I fed myself. I worked that for 10 years. So I knew how to make websites. And I think I heard that this guy, Jeff Never, who I've never really talked to since, was shutting down the website or was looking for somebody to take it over. So I took it over. I bought the domain name Jazz Bari Sax. I redesigned it. I added a bunch of pages. I did all this work, and I've been working on it and adding to it ever since. So that was like 2008. So
Okay.
the site is over 20 years old. I have been doing it for over 15, probably coming up on 20. It's one of the oldest saxophone sites on the internet. It's not super popular. I'm not like doing lots of reviews and trending stuff. And like, there's some other sites that come and go. They'll be like super popular for 2 years and then they disappear. And this one, I'm just trying to keep steady. It's a list of like all the important baritone players, especially ones you may not have heard of, like Leo Parker,
Yep.
who
Yeah.
I've got it. Actually, well, that's Claire Daly, and that's a photo of Leo Parker with my friend Claire Daly because I got that photo from her apartment.
Claire. Yeah, I
Uh,
interviewed Claire, and it's so sad that she passed away, but
yes,
phenomenal player and very
yeah,
revolutionary for women.
yes, and just the coolest human being. This is
Yeah.
a picture Claire had in her loft for many years that I was able to take when she passed, and that's
Wow.
a picture of Claire and her Dave Swolson. Anyway, so Leo Parker and Claire, they're both on the website. Have bios about them, some sound clips, some other stuff, links to albums, just a way for like somebody who's like in the middle of, Wyoming and doesn't have access to a baritone player. They can learn about the baritone players, not just Jerry Mulligan who comes up, not just Pepper Adams, but the Leo Parker, the Bob Gordon, the Serge Chaloff, the obscure people that you may not hear about otherwise. And it's a way to learn more about the baritone saxophone. I also have articles about like mouthpieces and horns and cases and traveling and bass clarinet. And over the years, I've toned them down a bit because I was used to be a very opinionated young person, and I've since tried to say, well, you know what, everything can work, but here's what this is good for. Here's what this is. Whereas before, I was like, right, low A baritone is terrible. I can't do it. Now I'm like, you know what, low A baritones have a place. They're fine. Here's if you want to do this, maybe it's good for that. If you don't, maybe it's. So the older I get, the more reasonable I get, the more I edit those articles and try and make them a little more inclusive. Um, I work for Van Doren, who makes reeds and mouthpieces for 15 years. So I've learned a lot about reeds and mouthpieces. So I also, I try and give useful information about reeds and mouthpieces there. I try not to make it a Van Doren poster site, but like, a lot of my knowledge that I've learned, I was always interested in equipment. But I've tried to update it with maybe more accurate information that I've since learned since working for that company. And transcriptions, that's really what probably most people come to it for. I have
Okay.
over 150 transcriptions on that site. It started with just my transcriptions that I did in high school, probably for Greg Fishman or other
Yep.
people.
Yeah.
And then people just started sending them in. They said, "Oh, here, I did a transcription of Ronnie Kuber's solo on this tune. Here it is." And they give it to me, and I put it up, and we have, I forget how many hundreds of thousands of downloads. I think we're probably at 500,000 or something like that
Wow.
over the years this has been up. So
Yeah.
every day dozens of people are downloading these free transcriptions. And obviously I tell people, listen, you should transcribe it yourself. That's the best way. But hey, if you're just a kid and you want to read a Jerry Mulligan solo, here it is. So it has that. I do loosely do reviews, mostly about like new products and stuff. I try not to be an album reviewer just because I don't want to go down that road. I also just don't want to, like, album reviews are only useful if you will tell people what's bad. And I just don't want to do that. Like,
Yeah,
so I'll mention, like, hey, if you like the Baritone saxophone, here's 5 or 6 albums that came out last year. Check them out.
right.
I try not to also promote my stuff too much. I call myself the curator because again, I didn't necessarily start the site, and ideally somebody will take it over from me eventually. So I feel like I am the current curator of it, but it's not, it's something that belongs to the baritone community. I'm probably most well known for that website. If I go to a show or I'm traveling or playing, maybe some people now, I have some TikTok followers and others, maybe they say, oh, I know you from TikTok. But over the years, mostly it's been like, oh, you're the Jazz Bari sax guy. I'm like, yes, that's me.
Got it.
That's me. So I'm probably most well known for that. So I try and make myself presence known because I want people to know who's running the site. I don't want to be like, I used to be like, oh, we've posted a transcription. It's like, it's me in my bedroom. The computer, like, there's no company here. It's very, so I've run it for a long time. I try to be transparent that it's something I run, but I try and be fair about it. I've always asking other people to write articles. I've done interviews. I interviewed Claire and other people. I'm constantly asking people to write articles. They often don't, but like I try to get other people's points of view, so it's not just mine.
Sure.
And yeah, and I've managed. It doesn't really take a lot of money, but it also doesn't make any money. So there's like some Amazon links, but for the most part,
No, it
I
makes
got rid of
sense.
the ads years ago, which I'm so happy about. I had Google Ads for years. That's how I paid for the hosting and all that stuff. I was like, we don't need more tracking on the internet. So there's like, if you happen to buy a product that I've linked to that I probably recommend, I may get $1 here and there that all goes to the hosting the website, but it's not a moneymaker for me. A lot of saxophone websites, they're a job for people, right? They're posting reviews, they're talking about
Yeah.
products, they're doing affiliate links, they're trying to be trendy as a way to as a secondary source of income. I do not make money on the website. I do not want to make money on the website. It's there for information to help people. It's not there to have a passive income for me.
Are
So
you
yeah.
you were in web design, and like web
Mhm.
design constantly is evolving, right? It's
Oh
constantly.
yeah.
So are you also up on, like the latest stuff so that you're able to revise? Okay, because
Nope.
it's
I mean, the site is on WordPress and I can update it and I can do what I need. But
okay.
I shut down my web design business almost 10 years ago.
Okay.
I was able to, between working at Van Dorn and just being a working musician, some other stuff, and I won the Litchfield Jazz Camp. I have enough work that I don't do web design anymore. I fired all my clients, so to speak, which they were
Okay.
all, I was very affordable and people liked me, so they were very sad to hear, but I didn't miss it. But yeah, I saw the writing on the wall, like to be up to date in web development, like nobody does what I did. Like when I started building websites, you literally opened a Word document or a text document. You started typing HTML from scratch. That's how I learned to build websites. It was tremendously fun. Nowadays, you install a Linux server locally and yeah, I just like too complicated. Like it was cool when I was like literally learning CSS and JavaScript and HTML and coding and all that stuff. Nowadays, it would all be just drag and drop. I mean, by the end of it, people were paying me to build Squarespace sites for them. I'm like,
Ah, okay.
this is not very interesting. I was building doctor offices websites on Squarespace. It's like
Yeah.
this is silly. It's not what I got into it for. So I stopped doing it. So I know enough to keep Jazz Bari Sax updated. It will need to move platforms someday. Maybe we'll move to Squarespace or somewhere else. It will need to move eventually. It has an Instagram page, but I'm not very active on it. Um,
No, it's more
Mostly it
the
lives on the
themes.
web.
It's more the
Yeah.
themes in WordPress that have to constantly evolve and keeping up with all
Yeah,
the
I keep the
plugins and
plugins,
stuff.
I'm trying to keep it secure so it doesn't get hacked and go down. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I updated enough. I still would hopefully count myself as tech savvy somewhat. I still understand sort of how servers work and can log in. So I'm not letting it totally rot. Yeah, you know, hopefully it's still
No,
valid.
it's an amazing resource, and a lot of my students, always talk about it. So, kudos to you
Great.
for curating it. I'll say it like that
Sure.
way.
Yeah.
All right, so let me ask this question though. So we've got the album, right? It's
Mhm.
Arch Music. It's
Yes.
coming out we're taping this early in November, but it's coming out
Yep.
November 14th, is it? Or
November 14th. And one thing I would like to say is, so I actually printed up vinyl, which was not cheap. I'm actually basically selling them at cost. I don't really make money on the vinyl because it's so expensive to print vinyl. But because of the sound of this album, It's very subtle and it's outdoors. I would really recommend listening to it on vinyl. The warmth of vinyl, the fidelity, the high quality. If you listen to this album on streaming, it'll be on streaming. You can listen to it there. Please feel free. But I actually don't think you're going to hear quite the depth you would as if you had a vinyl at home or could get, or if you purchase on Bandcamp, you can get the high quality downloads. Audio streaming, unfortunately, the way the codecs work, it's actually going to compress a lot of you're going to lose the tunnel reverberation. That is exactly what like streaming compression gets rid of. So it's not going to sound as good as in streaming. So it's out November 14th. I was fortunate enough to work with a record label, Ravello Records, which is a sub-label of Parma, and they're putting out November 14th. I'll actually be out of the country, but we're still going to celebrate release day. And there's a vinyl pre-order up. It's on Bandcamp. It'll be on the streaming platforms. But again, if you can get an actual copy of the files or the vinyl, it sounds. I mean, you put headphones on the vinyl, and it's almost like you're in the tunnel. It's pretty close. So that would be the recommended listening. Headphones for sure, and if possible, vinyl.
Are there links on your website in terms
Sure.
of
Yep.
okay for purchasing and stuff like that? And
Yep. AndrewHadro.com. You can go there and you can find the art music. It's also on Bandcamp. Hopefully, you'll see Ravello Records will post about it. But yeah, it's definitely up on my website. And if you go to Bandcamp, which is I think the best place for musicians to sell right now, because they basically they take the least amount of cuts as anyone. Also, Bandcamp Friday happens like once a month or so. You can
That's right.
the artists get all the fees. So I prefer selling on Bandcamp. It's like the best way to go. They make available when you buy an album, you can get the MP3s, which are smaller, or you can get the lossless huge audio files that you want. So I appreciate that they give you different options for your listening strategies. I may be the only person left in the world that actually downloads files, and I put them on my phone manually. I plug it into a computer, drag them over. I have no streaming uh, services or anything like that. I want to know what's on my phone album wise, and also I want the high quality audio files. So I'm the last one, but
No, no,
it's
you're
how I
not. I
prefer.
kind of do the same thing.
Okay.
Sometimes I listen to streaming, but I would prefer to
Great.
have the CD,
Yeah.
put it in. I'm still going to call it iTunes. I don't care. Put it
Yeah.
there, and then I'll put it on. That's what I
Yeah.
like.
Well, I've got a Mac that's old enough; it still has iTunes on it. Yeah. So
Okay, that's awesome. Well, you said also that like future projects. So you're going
yeah.
out of the country soon, right? For an
Yep.
international
Yep,
tour?
we're going and doing a little bit of a tour. Yep, with there's a big band I play with, Dan Pugac. We actually won the Grammy for
Awesome.
best large jazz ensemble this year. So we're doing a lot of playing and doing a little bit of a tour and going out. So yeah,
How long is that tour?
this is very odd. We are traveling very far for one performance at the Red Sea Jazz Festival. So it's just kind of an out and back. I mean, I'm gonna spend like 30 hours on the plane for like 2 days on the ground, but
Oh,
it's a chance to play. I've never been, and it's a great band. And yeah, we're trying to. Dan's wife Nicole's amazing. She won the Grammy last year for Best Vocal Jazz Album. So they are a power couple, and they both are some of the best musicians I know. So any chance to play with them, absolutely, I'll take it. So we're going to do that. So I'll be there for that, but I'll be back soon, and obviously it's going to be available. If you pre-order the vinyl, I'm going to try and mail it out before I leave, so that you don't have to wait till I
okay.
get back. But
No,
yeah.
that's good. And aside from arch music, any
Mhm.
thoughts about future projects after that?
Sure. My intention when COVID hit, I've really wanted to do a commission project where I commission composers to write a feature for baritone saxophone with strings, string quartet, string octet. And so when COVID hit, I was like, oh, this is great. Composers all of a sudden they need work and they have time. So I actually commissioned 5 composers to write a piece, and I gave them free range, write whatever you want. The restraint is I want to play on it, and you can use anywhere from 4 string players to 8 string players, add piano, bass, drums, whatever you want. And I commissioned composers and I got pieces written. I've recorded one of them. Petros Kompanis is a Greek composer who I love his music. He during COVID he managed to get like string players from the Athens Symphony Orchestra together and record this piece. And I did my part in New York, and we put out one track. But
Oh,
there's more pieces, and I would like to commission more, but it's insanely expensive. I had like one rehearsal; it cost me $1,000, and I
wow.
was like, oh, there's no way I can't, and I want to perform it. I don't want to just go in the studio and record it and never play it. So that I have a strings project basically ready to go. I've learned all the music. It's very hard. I have these composers. I have more composers I want to commission. I know string players. I need a grant. I need funding. I need more time in the day to hustle to to do all this. So that's in the works. Pardon the sirens.
That's New York.
I am actually in Brooklyn, in case I was wondering. Also, this year I really want to record just a quartet. Just I have two albums out already. The first one was quartet, and the second one was more of a duo trio thing. But I want to record just some straight ahead jazz, which is not something I've ever really done. I do it a lot, and I feel like now I'm comfortable enough that I can play on standards and be creative and not feel like I'm just playing something that's been done before, if that makes sense. Like I feel like I have enough freedom now that I can improvise over straight ahead jazz and not feel like I'm mimicking what came before as much. So that's in the hopper and that's more doable, right? I know how to do that. I know the budget. I can pull that off. I can get a gig at Smalls. That's more feasible than pulling in a mini string orchestra and trying to find a concert venue and do that. But those are two projects I very much want to do. There's so much more solo saxophone playing in different spaces I could do. Arch music too could happen.
Yeah.
I do so many big bands and I'm always recording with big bands. There's more big bands on the way that have albums coming out that I'm on, stuff like that. But yeah, it never ends. There's always stuff to do and never enough ways to do it.
Yeah, but that's great. I mean, it's great that you're so busy, and congratulations on the success of this album. And
Thank you.
I could see this being a series. I could see this being a massive concept, honestly.
Yeah, I
So
appreciate it. Yeah.
yeah, no. So listen, Andrew, it was awesome having you on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I'm nerding out about saxophone, and this is what I do all day. So I love it. I hope I didn't just rant too much.
No, no, not at all. This was great stuff. And,
Great.
I always say this too, like after every interview, that I do with people, I get to learn new people, I get to learn new things, and I learned a lot, and this was a lot of fun. Thank you again so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.